All right. Welcome back to what's going to be the first interview on this iteration of the USL show. I am joined by a very special guest, someone who is really, really interesting, really, really fun to research and really cool project. He is a part of Project 510, not 5110. It is 510 out of the Oakland Roots camp. This is a man that hails from Swansea, Wales. I'm sure he's the biggest Cardiff City fan in the world. Um, Judging by the left, that was a big resounding no. I'm, of course, being joined by Michael Hannon, also known as Coach Mikey. How you doing, Coach?
I'm good. How are you, bud?
I'm doing fantastic. So I'm taking him a little bit wrong on the Cardiff comment, huh?
Yeah. Well, just a little bit wrong. Just a little bit.
So I I've did a little bit of research on just you because I've heard your name floated around from time to time, but most of the time, whenever I hear of names of coaches, I'm like, oh, I know them from this college, this university, so on and so forth. But I've heard your name, but I couldn't find any immediate US ties. And whenever I
Mhm.
started researching you, you started coaching before like even people that you're working with day to day can drive. There
Yeah.
you started coaching at 16 years old, is that right?
Yeah. So I had a little bit of a luxury when I was in at what we call college, which is pretty much the end of your high school. Um, I studied in the sports department, and I had the luxury of working with two lecturers or professors, what you would call, who worked at Swansea City as academy. They also worked at Arsenal soccer schools, so it's something that I took a keen interest in. And they said, "Come along." I mean, start young, get a lot of experience. So, to be honest, I owe a lot of my future career to them because they got me in early within a really good environment. I think the first time I was with Swansea City was the time when Roberto Martinez was there. So it was a really interesting and fun time to learn my craft, so to speak.
So you're over there with Swansea and the Arsenal soccer schools or football schools, which I've tried. That's such a foreign concept, I guess. It's because it's kind of a mix of what we would call an academy team, but not really. It's almost kind of like kind of like a football camp, almost.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
what because I mean, Arsenal and Swansea, those are two massive names that even the most brand new fans of the sport here in the US have heard of. What exactly is a soccer camp, a football camp, if you will?
So, in terms of the Arsenal soccer schools being such an established Premier League team, right, similar to the Manchester United to the world, etc., these big name clubs go into different areas and set up these schools, and it's more of a somewhat what you would call an identification, right? If there's someone who's really good, for example, Aaron Ramsey went from Cardiff and he was up in Arsenal. Do you know what I mean? Gareth Bale went from Cardiff to Southampton. So it's another way to possibly scout players. In terms of what is a soccer camp, it's just simply it depends on what you're providing, right? You have your typical summer camp, which is for every range of ability. Um, that provides more fun and some technical aspects. And then you may have like a residential camp, which is probably catered to the more committed athlete. And then you've got collegiate, you name it, there's a camp for everything these days. So that's pretty much the basis of it all.
So we'll come back to your upbringing as a coach, but I'm kind of curious, these identification camps, if you will,
Mhm.
are is that something that you guys really utilize with Project 510, or is that like how does the recruitment process work for Project?
So we don't necessarily do camps, so to speak. So we have a couple of people who we trust within the Bay Area to bring us some talent and identify talent for us and make us aware. We also have Nana, who is on the staff, who is one of the main guys for the player personnel, and he spends a lot of time out there scouting. And then typical route of going to your Surf Cup events, all these top tournaments, locally or outside, and seeing what talent's there. But that ranges, because obviously we want to provide for the immediate area. So one, I'm a director of a club in the local area, so I can identify a lot there through different leagues. And my assistant coaches one works within the Alameda County, which is close to the Oakland area. So we can recruit there. And there's also something this year that we are sort of opening training pools where we will invite a bunch of younger talent in and identify talent that way as well.
So when you mentioned being, the sporting director of a local club as well. If you're going against, I mean, obviously, the kids that are on your team, you've been around those kids and which ones are talent through practice, through watching the matches. If you see someone, someone say 15-year-old kid or something playing for another team, another academy or another club, and you're like that, that guy, that girl has real potential. They have it. How do you go about getting them to join Project 510? Do you talk to their parents? Do you talk to your support staff, to your assistant coaches? Who do you go through?
So this is where a key part of myself and Jordan Farrell, the technical director, it's about building relationships with the local clubs and community that surround us, right? So if we do identify Bob, whoever his name is, we would connect with the director first, right? Because one thing we are big on is keeping players within their own environment while trying to provide professional opportunities. There's a lot, not just in this country, but in all over Europe. There are very young players traveling long ways when they're wasting 2 or 3 hours in a car every night where they could just drive down the road and be on the field, right?
Yeah.
So what we want to do is say, hey, stay with your local club, be committed to your sort of whatever you're striving for, and we will provide that professional opportunity. So that's something that we're key on, trying to build relationships, keep people within their local club while still trying to provide that professional opportunity. And obviously, if it gets to a stage where this 16-year-old, 17-year-old really has true potential, for example, Javi Mariona, who made an appearance for the first team, that's where we have a serious conversation with both club and family to see what is the best pathway, right? And for the most part, these directors in the area are very good with us and are looking out for the best interest of the player, right? So it's been a good start so far because we really started pushing it last season. And now this season, myself, Jordan, Nana are really going to strive forward to make this something that's a bigger part of what we're trying to achieve.
So this is kind of, I guess, based on recruiting, sort of not. I mean, if, for people who are just listening to the podcast version of this, I highly recommend you go into YouTube just to see what Coach Mikey is in right now. I mean, that is a nice pullover. I mean, the Project 510 is it's a wonderful logo. I mean, the Oakland Roots are known around the US and even the world of just looking nice. How much does, kind of being swagged out, being a little bit drippy, how much does that really kind of go to the kids where it's like, not only is it playing for a brand like Oakland Roots, but for a lot of the kids, it is, oh, I have standard Adidas red kit on today, and it's just a standard Adidas red kit. And then you get something nice like the Puma stuff that Project 510 has. Is that any kind of the recruitment or just a small part of it?
Yeah, I think if it's always great to be a part of something that's connected to a professional organization, right? And again, the whole team behind all the marketing and the branding and the Oakland brand and what they're about is second to none. There's not much that competes with it that I've seen, and that's not me being biased. You can ask around the league, you can ask anywhere in the Bay Area, right? they're very well known for their attire, their clothing lines, and all this stuff. So they do a fantastic job there. I think as a 16, 15, 16, 17-year-old, oh, I'm going to play with the Roots or whatever, is that an attraction? For sure. Is it always nice to wear the branding clothing? For sure. But from a coach, and I can't speak for others, but from my perspective, if the player is only interested in wearing the brand or trying to look good, they're not really in it for the right reasons, right? Feel good, play good, for sure, but the mentality should be, I'm here to develop, get better, and go and win championships with the Oakland Roots in the future, right? It's not, if he just turns up to the field and he's like, hey coach, look what I'm wearing, look how good I look, I'm like, okay, like, good job, but now we're focused on the field, you know what I mean? So I think for sure, does it feel good? Yes, but is it the main focus? Not at all, right? There's so many aspects to the four pillars of technical, tactical, physical, mental, all those aspects. And yeah, just coming down to, are they a good person? Do they have good characteristics? Because that's another thing, right? Are you good for the environment? Are you a culture champion, not a culture killer? That's a key thing.
See, this is where I'm just being outed as much more materialistic than the average, I guess, 15-year-old. And it has absolutely nothing to do with that. I am horrible at soccer and I'd have no chance to play with Project 510 anyway. That's beyond the point. But you mentioned something there at the end that I really wanted to pick, that I wanted to talk about. And it's kind of, what's the main project point, or what is the balance that you have to strike between human versus player development? How do you develop the person and develop the player at the same time? Is that a balance that you have to strike from, day in, day out? Or is it something that, like you said, you find the good people first, and then find the good human beings first, and then they are also good soccer players?
No, it's a great question. And I think it's something that coaches a challenge with daily, right? Because it's hard to, the reality is, when you're in an environment it is about development, but you have to have a winning mentality, because if you go from a reserve pool into an elite level pool where these guys are battling day in and day out to keep their jobs and bring in the money and put food on their table for their families, their mentality is at all costs is win, 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 right? So it's important that, and I think it's a word that some people get scared of, the winning part, but you need to have that competitive edge to get to the top, for sure. But being a part of this organization, especially, it's very important that I think the word would be nurture and guide players to understand the sort of fine margins of be confident, right? For sure, be confident. And some players, it's okay. Like, you look at Ronaldo, sometimes people look at him and think, oh, he's a bit cocky, he's this, but he's an elite performer, right? He has an elite mentality, and there's a reason why he's at the top. And he carries himself a little bit differently from the way Messi carries himself. So it's very managing the people, understanding their backgrounds, understanding their family environment. So for me, it's just, when we arrive at the field, I have a luxury of assistants, so they're out there, they already know what's going on, as we have weekly meetings. So they're out there setting up and making sure everything is ready for a good training session. And it's sort of a time where I connect with people. How's your day going? If they are younger players, how was school today? Right, trying to understand how their day has gone and how it may affect the session, right? When we've got older players, they might be coming from work. How was your day at work? Was it a tough day? Was it a good day? And then you can understand who you can really push to the boundary and who you might need to be a little bit more careful with in that day. So it's sort of finding that right balance, but never letting go of these players understanding why they're here. And sort of, once you're sort of inside the white lines, you're there to compete and bring your all and do what's best for the individual, which collectively makes the best team. Do you know what I mean?
So for Project 510, what what is exactly the criteria? What are you looking for? Are you looking for a certain player from a certain socioeconomic status? Are you looking for a certain age range? Are you obviously looking for talented players? What all goes into the criteria of you really scouting a player and you trying to recruit them to join you?
Yeah, I think a key part, again, we have a lot of people out there who are bringing us these players and building the relationships with the local clubs. For us, the key is obviously the 510 area, right? If you're unfamiliar with that, it's pretty much sort of East Bay location. So that's the primary target to try and get players in. And then it's Bay Area and then further afield, right? So that's just primary. If there's someone who's out of state or maybe in Southern California that is an exceptional talent, then that's something that Jordan usually steps up and deals with as a technical director. In terms of what we're looking for, we have a database system where we have like a scoring system on all these different things. We look at players' insight, which is pretty much their soccer IQ and how they read the game. Are they just running around, or are they finding the right moments to run instead of, you know what I mean? Technical ability, obviously, in the details. Athletic physical profile is always one, and then the mentality. How do they react to feedback? How are they interacting with their teammates? So on and so forth, right? So I don't think there's any sort of secret source from anybody else who's probably doing it out there, right? I think there's so much information on the internet these days, and pretty much aligns with the 4 key characteristics, whether it's physical, technical, tactical, psychosocial, right? All these sort of key components is what you really break down to. But I think what we do is when we identify players and we see where they are and they come into our training environment, the more time we get with them and the more data input we do that we can collect over a season, it sort of gives us a better profile of, do they have the first team potential, or what areas do they need to work on to get to the first team? Or sometimes, unfortunately, they might not be ready, or they might not have the potential, and that's where the tough part of the job comes in, and we have to be honest and say, right now, it's not for you.
So when you say you have to have those tough conversations, are these with people who are already a part of Project 510, and you just say, hey, you're not ready yet, we might have a spot for you later on? Or is it like maybe it is truly they're kind of like trying out for the team, and you say, hey, come back next year, you might have it? Who are the people that you are either turning away or letting go, I guess?
It's a mixture, right? Because we play USL 2 and we also play in another league when the USL 2 is done. So sometimes it's just older guys who are just going to hurt the environment, and we just have to be honest early doors. If it's a younger player, they usually get more time. And for the most part, younger players are identified to come into the environment versus just opening the door and letting every man and his dog in. So it's younger people usually get a little bit more time, and we develop them, but there's no sort of, I wouldn't say there's no like something on a document that says we do it to these people, right? It's very sort of situational of what the current climate is, because we've also got college guys that come in over the summer as well. So if I was to give you a broad answer, it's sometimes it's younger guys, sometimes it's college guys, sometimes it's the guys who are past college.
So you've mentioned older guys. I'm assuming that your version of older guys is probably not the same as what the Roots are dealing with, huh?
Yeah, I mean, technically older guys are guys who are probably out of college and beyond, which could be like a 23-year-old, which I know is not in the landscape of old, but in hindsight, if they're not doing much, if they haven't been drafted, or if they haven't found any USL platform, by then. Do you know what I mean? It's not a never, but it's also a very tough step to continue to go. Do you know what I mean?
So I'm guessing me, a 22-year-old who hasn't played since high school, I'm looking at my last year of being ready, huh?
Yeah, you better get to work for sure.
Well, I'll get to work on. I'll send you my film. I'll warn you. Well, I'll just go ahead and tell you my scouting report. I can stop almost every shot when it comes to playing goalkeeper. The issue is I will never hang on to it. And if you're looking for me to kick it long, can't kick it farther than 15 yards. We are man citying this thing all day long. I'm just going to give you the scouting report now. So
that sounds good. Maybe we can get you involved in a charity match or something.
So, whenever I was looking up a lot of this stuff as well, it was Project 510 was based on Project 40 by Nike, which was really meant to build up the U.S. men's national team, which produced really good players like DeMarcus Beasley, who is, I believe, the owner of another USL League Two team, and Tim Howard, who is a partial owner of Memphis 901, also known for being pretty good at soccer. What way are you guys modeling your academy after that? Is it purely off the branding, or is it truly something within the inner workings of the team and the project itself?
Can you rephrase that question a little bit so I can get a better understanding? Are you saying, are we relying on, are you asking basically, are we relying on the Oakland Roots brand to make us something, or is Project 510 something that we are working strongly on to develop players or get players in?
Okay, so whenever I was looking it up, the Project 510 was based on Project 40 by Nike, which produced a lot of great talent. Is when it says it is based on, is it truly based on like the inner workings of Project 40, or is it more or less just kind of based on the branding of it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. I think it's the idea, right? I sort of what you said, they created it to bring in a lot of good talent and develop talent and push them onto the national team, right? So we are trying to do the same thing with the same idea, right? It's an idea that they saw and it's something that they thought, oh, we could do this. So that's what we are trying to do. And we've already had success with it, right? I mean, we had 3 guys in our training environment last year, 2 played, all played and got called up with El Salvador's U20 national team, right? We had 2 14-year-olds play in our league last year, who stepped up. So I would say that we probably honestly had maybe 15 or so players that were under the age of 18 that made appearances last year. Some of the rosters were 6 or 7 players that were under the age of 18, with some 23, 4, 25-year-olds who had experience maybe playing in NISA, who were very good role models for the players to look up to and also work with. So that was a good key balance. But I think to answer your question, they saw the idea, they thought what a great idea, they embraced the idea, put their own little spin on it, and now we've already in the first year done a lot of work of producing. And like I said, there was 2 14-year-olds, 1 15-year-old, maybe 2 or 3 16-year-olds, the rest 18, 19-year-olds that are already slowly coming through. And we also had the luxury of young Javi making his appearance at 16 within a USL game, which is essentially the goal.
Whenever you have players obviously play with the senior team, get in on an actual match and with the first team, that's obviously huge. But whenever you get those young players, the 14-year-olds, the U20 call-ups, do you guys kind of go to your back offices, whenever the players aren't around, and just have like a mini party because you're like, we did it? Because I would just be having just the time of my life knowing that I helped someone really live out a dream at some stage. And obviously that's not the final goal, but it's definitely a key part of it.
No, listen, I think is it something that we are very proud of? For sure. But we have also got to treat it as if it's our everyday life, right? It's for us, it's got to be something that's natural, because we can't get excited. And another thing is they've got called up and it's a good experience, but they're still not consistently with the first team, and that's a goal, right? Once a player is consistently in a first team roster, whether they're sitting on the bench or in the squad, once they reach that level of consistency, that's where we've done something truly right. And then hopefully if they're that good, they have the ability to maybe take an even further step, and that's when we've truly achieved what we're looking for, right? But I've been in many academies and environments, and these kids get called in and out of national team camps, and they make appearances in these certain leagues, because there's other clubs in the leagues that had some youngsters as well, and it happens. So right now it's somewhat of a normal thing. We are doing some good work for sure, but the goal is they need to be consistently within the first team environment and succeeding. Once they do that, then Jimmy, maybe we'll pop open the lemonade. But until then, it's we got to continue to grind. We've got to continue to keep working with these players and making sure they're achieving what they came into the environment for and why we are here.
So let's spin this a little bit to League Two.
Mm-hmm.
You are, I mean, the USL League Two, formerly the PDL, Professional Development League, that whole sort. You're dealing with a lot of types of players. Like you said, you're dealing with sometimes 14-year-olds. You're dealing with kids who are dealing. You're working with kids who are coming from college, who are just out of their college season. They have really nothing else to do and they want to get better. You're working with people who are full-on adults who, maybe aren't going to be playing at a much higher level, but they're good enough to play for you and they're good locker room guys. How do you deal with that wide of an age range and that many different kinds of cultures, and then putting them out there to compete? Because in the end of the day, development's awesome, but you're also there to win some games. How do you put it all together to win those matches?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think you touched on it a little bit there in terms of, one, when we're bringing people into our environment, obviously we're analyzing and sort of assessing their soccer performances. But like we touched on earlier, having conversations with people. Do they understand the environment? Do they understand the Oakland Roots? Because essentially, if you're coming to play for us, you're representing the brand, so to speak, and anything they do affects what we're about. So players understanding all these things is a key thing. For example, we have a couple of guys who are on the older end, but are great role models, and maybe from Oakland or nearby Oakland, that really understand and embrace what we're about, right? So those types of guys who are not only about that, but are good soccer players and also want what's best for the younger guys are key to lead the culture, right? So I think that's key. The college guys can be probably the more challenging part because we don't see them as much, and then they come into the environment for a short span of time. So again, that's something that we rely and have conversations with college coaches. So example, in our area, I would have conversations with Santa Clara, Cal, Stanford, San Jose State, USF, St. Mary's, etc., and really get an understanding of, is the player right for our environment? And we go really from a trust factor then, right? And when they come in, we hope it works out. And for the most part, the college guys are from the area because they're coming back from whatever school they're in. For example, we have a guy called Quinn who plays at Michigan, and in the summer he comes back and plays with us, right? So he also understands the Bay Area landscape as well. So balancing that all out, And basically, I think what brings it together is, one is obviously having the talent, two, everybody understanding what we're about, the principles in terms of what we're about, the way we play, the values we carry. And when you tie that all together and create a good culture, hopefully the ball ends up in the back of the net if you want to win the games, right? But soccer can be a cruel game, as we all know. But yeah, that's pretty much the main part of identifying their characteristics and making them buy into what we're trying to do. And hopefully the end result comes up.
From an outsider who I had heard of the Oakland Roots before they joined the USL, when they were with NISA and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that precedes the Oakland Roots was not the play on the field, but really the impact that the Roots have off the pitch. Everybody kind of knows what they stand for socially and what the goals are of the club, of not just putting on a quality product, which, seeing last year with the USL championship season, they know how to do. It's also making sure that each person stands for what they believe. For someone who's not from Oakland or who is not familiar with the Roots story, how do you explain that to someone who's looking to join 510 and say, listen, you're playing for more than just the badge. You're playing for more than just your career. You're playing for a lot of ideals and a lot of beliefs right now that are bigger than just you and me.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's for me, the way to answer that, especially being from Swansea, right, is that Swansea is very, I don't want to say it's similar to Oakland in the sense of we carry similar values, right? I come from a hard working background family that I understand what it's about to be a part of a small town city. And you know how soccer fans are back in the UK. They're very passionate about their club. And as you mentioned, Cardiff, it made me grimmer a little bit. So
Sorry.
understanding what you're representing, right? And sort of giving back to the local community. And again, I'm a director of a club that is very similar to Oakland as well. And we're very community oriented and trying to give back to the community, trying to support people who are in certain struggles, so on and so forth, right? And I think another key thing for me is two of my assistants. One is from Alameda, which is obviously on the doorstep and where the Roots train, and one is from East Bay area as well. So those two also have a really good understanding. So sometimes it's not just about myself. It's about bringing in the right support staff to support you. And also I've had the ability to sit down with Jordan, sit down with Steve, the chairman, right? Sit down with some local players who will have conversations, will make sure you have a good understanding of what the club is about and what they're trying to achieve. And I think to sum it up, I think I come from a very similar background in terms of working hard, striving for something, being very supportive of your neighbor, trying to embrace the local community. And then obviously the modern day now, there's a lot of challenges that are being addressed, and that's where the Oakland Roots are doing very well, which is fantastic. And especially a guy being married to someone who is not the same culture as myself and not the same race, I also have to embrace that myself and understand that the struggles that sometimes may occur to her being from an Asian background, right? So it's definitely day in, day out, I continue to learn and I continue to embrace what the culture is about. So I'm not going to sit here and say I understand everything, but I'd like to think I have some understanding of what people are looking for and where the Roots are looking to help out. And I'm always the first to hold up my hand and say, whatever you want me to be a part of, how can I help and support? And I think that's the key part of being part of the Oakland Roots is, are you open-minded? Are you about change? And are you willing to step up when change needs to happen? And I think that's probably why I'm here.
How important is it to you as a coach to show that you're basically the students of the game that you're working with, how important is it to you and to them that you make it obvious that you're still taking the time to learn more, not only about the game, but as you said, constantly evolving the way that you think about the community around you and learn about the community that surrounds you? How important is it for you to make that very transparent to the players?
Yeah, I think for I think in short, if players see that you have a fixed mindset and you're not open to conversation, or you're not open to sort of, I personally feel that you have to show some vulnerability, because that opens up for you to be approachable, right? And as a coach, you need to be approachable because many different people are going through different situations. So I think, to answer your question, it's very important. If you're a fixed mindset, people will shut down, won't bother to open up to you, won't bother to approach you if they have issues. And what that really does is it causes a disconnect and a distance between you and your players, and then there's no way that you can build together, right? So to answer your question, I think it's very important. Yeah.
So granted, I don't have the near coaching experience that you do, obviously, but I was working with some kids last year, high school players, and it's really interesting learning the difference between certain people. For me personally, I come from an education background. I'm in school to be a teacher. And I understand that you kind of have to teach different for different people, but I didn't really make that connect to soccer players as well. And I was just kind of treating everybody the same, of like, come on, let's go. You're doing great. Let's go to this drill, this drill, this drill. And I would give little bits of feedback here and there. And granted, I've never had someone ask me this bluntly, but one kid just told me, he was like, hey, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to listen to you until you get in my face and scream at me. Like, that's just how I learn. Obviously, most people don't just tell you that, but do you kind of identify those people of like, I need to be a little bit more, not soft, but that's not a good word, but basically be a little bit more relaxed in the way that you deliver feedback versus, getting in someone's face and telling them do this, this, and this, and they're just like, yeah, now I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go do the thing that you asked of me. Do you have to do that, or do you just kind of have one style that you're like, this works for me, it works for everybody else, let's do the thing?
No, I think this is the key component to coaching, right? I think a lot of people will get caught up in X's and O's, but a lot of it is about the man management and understanding your players, and it's important that you have a good support staff around you. Like I touched on earlier, having initial conversations before they come into practice. There might be a person that can handle being spoken to in that manner, but they might have a tough day. So you speak to them in that manner and they could explode, right? So it's important, one, to understand how they are feeling within that moment and in that day. And then the second thing is understanding the importance of your soft skills, right? There's some people who are not as extroverted as others, or might not be able to, they might just shut down if you scream at them. So I think once you start to build, hey, everybody's here for a common goal, right? We all want to win. We all want to get better. We're all striving to be in the top team, right? Everybody has that common goal. So you, for the most part, you maintain a similar communication throughout, but it's sort of controlling yourself and your emotions to deliver in the right moment, right? Because, for example, when a glass smashes in a kitchen and you don't see it, it initially causes shock because it's something that doesn't usually happen. So if you're on a coaching field and you're constantly screaming, after a while it just tunes out. Or if you're constantly blowing your whistle, after a while it tunes out, right? So that's where you have to, it's all about your delivery. When is the right moment to step in and say, and demand something? When is the right moment to pull someone aside and have a conversation to develop them, right? So that's where, and again, I am probably very much here comparing it. Jordan, I've worked with Jordan a lot over the past year, and the guy is very good at when is the moment to deliver the key message, right? So a lot of learning from me from him, but that's one of the biggest things I've learned is how to control the emotion and the delivery in the right moment to get your message across. Because if it's one thing all the time, then it's just gonna, after a while, it's gonna tune out, right?
So that was kind of the last question I had of stuff that I prepared and whatnot. But I did have some questions from the outside of asking people, hey, submit some questions. One of these is really, really long. The other one is super duper short. So we're going to start with the one that is super short. This one is very straightforward, but there was no explanation to it.
Okay.
The question is just simply, why? Take with that as you will.
Why questions for Mikey Hannon? Is that what the why is?
I don't think so. They said why? Please ask him that.
Who is it from?
Someone who was in our Discord. It was it was very random. I'm gonna maybe spin it to why do you love what you do, but it was just simply why.
Yeah, we'll take the positive approach in it. There could be another interpretation of it. But I mean, listen, in terms of why I'm in the environment, is I live and breathe the game. It's sort of part of my DNA. Growing up with the game, if I'm not on the field playing, or if I'm not on the street playing, I'm watching it on the television, right? And it's something that I inherit, and I sort of wanted to strive through and get better and continue to do it. So it's most of the part is for the love of the game.
So I mean, yeah, that's I didn't know where
this
was.
That's the best as I can do for a question that just says why. So I'm sorry if I failed in that question.
I don't know what the answer was supposed to be. I don't even know what the question truly is. I mean, I understand what why means, but I don't know what we're questioning. But it is what it is. The next question, it's a pretty long one, and I might break it up into some different sections. Okay. You're working with people who are close to being drafted, like you mentioned, if they're around being drafted into the MLS or being signed to, either in the US or abroad. And the question is, what impact do you think MLS Next will have on the USL 2? For so many players, pipeline has always been USL League 2 to League 1 to the championship to MLS. They threw in some stats in here of 83 of the U.S. internationals were former USL League 2 players. So many super draft players were also League 2 players. 61 players in the 2019 draft were played in the USL League 2, 81% of them. What impact do you think MLS Next will have on USL League 2? And if it does have an impact, do you think the quality will just come through League 2 anyways?
I don't think it's going to have too much of an impact because of the size of the country, right? Will there possibly be some disparity in terms of level? Maybe. But in hindsight, there's so many colleges, there's so many programs, there's so many people who reach out to you that it's not really going to affect anything. I think even just speaking from our experience last year, there were guys who were good college players that were playing within the Quakes U23 program, right? And we still had a bunch of guys playing within our program. And another reality is when these players come back, if they've already played with the Quakes, they have that homegrown opportunity. So even if we wanted them and the Quakes say we want them, what can you do? So to answer the question in short, I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue just due to the mass size of everything. I think if you said it's going to happen in Swansea and you got all these teams, then it might be a bit of an issue because Swansea is the same size as San Jose. But I don't think it's going to be an issue. There's so much quality within the USL too. I know the San Francisco teams have a lot of quality, and I believe Jimmy is still at San Francisco Glens. So a lot of people are going to want to play there. Marin have just come into the picture, and I know they have a lot of great leadership over there. so they are not going to struggle. There's so many different people. Davis Legacy have just come in who have just been on a great run in the UPSL, and again, good leadership, fantastic facilities. So all these programs around are doing great job, and I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue.
Something I meant to ask earlier, but this reminded me of it. When you are working with young players, many of which who are looking at going to college or university or whatever of the sort, do you guys help out with that process? Do you help with trying to get those kids recruited? Do you help them make decisions of like, I know this coach, I know he'll treat you like this? Or is it truly like, hey, this is for you and your legal guardian. This is your life. You make the choice on your own.
Yeah, we don't necessarily, I won't say we don't help because that would be wrong. My way I would say it is, for the most part, the young kids that come into our program, the young players, are already a part of a club environment that is, for the most part, a truly high level, right? Now, these clubs have directors, they have collegiate pathway directors or whatever title people give themselves these days, right? So they usually help them. Now, if a player comes to us and says, hey, what do you think of my level? Where do you think you see me? Or what do you think of this college? Or have you got any feedback? We are open to having a conversation with them and giving them an opinion and making sure that it's not detrimental to anybody on the outside, because we don't want to do that, right? So all we can say is, this is our thoughts on it. This is this. You take that feedback. You do what it is with that feedback, right? So, and again, it's only been the first year. Like, we have a player who is committed to San Diego State, who was El Salvador national team and played with us as well. So he's going to college, right? And that's a tough thing. That's probably one of the biggest challenges within US soccer, that USL is a great platform for it, is trying to change that. Can we produce players for the USL and potentially go beyond without the collegiate option? But unfortunately, like many parents tell me in the Bay Area, my kid can make more money as an engineer than they can as a soccer player. Yeah, you can. But what drives you, right? What makes you get up in the morning? What are you passionate about? And everybody has different avenues and different pathways. And for me, if people choose a soccer pathway, that's great. How can we help you, right? But Jordan's very big on, it's okay to choose the college pathway, because we hope you go to college and then filter back into our system, because it is good to have an education behind you as well, right? So we're very supportive of, do you want to go pro? Do you want to go to school? Do you want to go community college and still play and then go to school? Because one of our first team players is doing college at the moment. So we're very supportive of every avenue. And when people ask for help, we will provide help. But do we go out of our way and say, hey, this is, you do this, this, and this? No, because we would be stepping on the toes of the clubs, because that's what part of what they provide, right?
All right. I mean, that was a phenomenal answer. And then I've learned a lot about you guys, but also just kind of how almost these USL Academy / just general academy stuff works. I didn't really understand, so I've learned a whole lot, and I hope everybody who's listening has as well. I'm just going to give you one last question before I let you go. And it is, I want you to give me your 60-second elevator pitch of why should I, a young recruit, let's assume I am good, should join Project 510.
Why they should join Project 510? Well, again, one, it's being a part of a fantastic organization that can support you in many avenues of life, right? We can provide professional soccer opportunities, but as you know, there's more to life outside of soccer. So we can support you, as one of our first team player has podcasts, open cafes, etc. We have avenues to support you outside of soccer, not just on the field. Another thing is, you don't have to leave your local environment. So you can stay in your local environment while we provide you opportunities to have that professional exposure. if you want to go to an MLS tournament, go to an MLS tournament, because we have the best of both worlds, right? And then it's just the quality of staff. Jordan Federal, technical director, head coach of project Oakland Roots last year. He's at every training session with myself. Fantastic staff, and again, opportunities to play within the first team environment. So a professional pathway, if you want that, we're a great environment for that. If you want a collegiate pathway, you can still do that while getting professional training. So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
I'm sold, and you didn't even have to sell the fact that you guys have a Puma partnership either. I'm sold on joining the team.
I forgot about the Puma. I try to avoid the clothing.
You just throw it in there at the last little thing.
We got uniforms.
By the way, we look awesome. And that's kind of the Oregon Ducks route, I guess, for everybody who watches college football, I guess. Coach Mikey, that was awesome. I've had a great time. For people who are listening or watching right now, there's ways to support Project 50 or 510. There's, if you're in the Oakland area, there's memberships that you can get through the Roots, and and you can go watch 510 in person for free if you are a part of that membership. If you look on the USL Show Twitter, we just retweeted something from the Roots, which was a really cool shirt that had the Project 510 right on the front, white design.
I'm wearing it underneath you.
As soon as I get off this call, I'm going to go buy one, because as soon as I saw it, I loved it. So, there's lots of ways to support the project. Any places that I did not mention that we can support the project as well?
Yeah, I think it's just in your standard locations, right? It's, if you follow Instagram, Twitter, Facebook is usually the main streams of where you can follow the Oakland Roots for the first team, and get to their games and show support there. Also, the best thing again is outside of soccer, they show a lot of downtown events, or a lot of community aspects that everybody can support, or social justice events that people can donate to, and so we can try and continue to better the community. And then for 510, it's the same thing. It's free to watch us, so you don't have to pay. So if you turn up and you don't like it, you're always free to leave without losing money, but hopefully you stay. But yeah, we play most of our games at Merritt College on a Sunday. So we would love everybody to show up and see, hopefully, the future of Oakland Roots.
Well, again, thank you. Like I said, I'm going to go order that t-shirt right now, because it's very nice. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching to this. Thank you again, Mr. Mikey Hannon, not a Cardiff City supporter. Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Thanks.